absolute barn burner featherweight. Coming up this weekend, we have Bruce Leeroy, Alex Caceres, who's had competitive fights against some of the best guys in this division's history, really, taking on Sting, Seung Woo Choi. And while I don't know if he's going to fly in from the top ropes and put in whatever Sting's finisher is, what I can tell you is if you went to a scenario in 2019 and said, Craig, Matt, Seung Woo Choi is going to go on a heater of a run. He's going to look like a future top 15 guy. And oh, by the way, Alex Caceres is going to do the same thing. We would have said you're absolutely insane. Like, it wouldn't have made any sense. You would have broken my brain. What do you think about that?
It would have been insane because Alex Caceres at that point was just kind of a 50-50 fighter. Like, yeah, he had big opportunities. He had been in fun fights. But for the most part, you were just throwing Alex Caceres out there to almost build up another guy off of his name. But Alex Caceres has kind of had this late career resurgence as of late, and it's really refreshing to see because how many times has there been just exciting MMA fighters where we say, goodness, if they could just put it all together, then they'd really be able to go on a run. Caceres was the definition of that fighter. It was like, okay, he might have been brought in a little bit too early, but we can learn on the job, and he was learning on the job, but it feels like at least these last few fights, I'm more confident in Alex Caceres as a fighter, just as an observer. Like, he's got a little bit better takedown defense. He's a little bit more active. It's just everything that Alex Caceres has been doing. It feels like it's been a little bit more refined throughout the last couple of years. It's refreshing to see because I gotta be honest, I completely written him off. I never thought we were going to see those marked improvements from Alex Caceres, but he has completely proved me wrong and I couldn't be happier about it.
Well, the weirdest thing about Caceres, he gets out-grappled by Jason Knight, like big time. Like Knight's schooling on him but can't really get the submission. Then he fights Chrome Gracie and it's like, okay, well, Gracie's good, and he's coming over from Ryzen, and we have, big expectations. Then he goes in there and blows the doors off Caceres. Now Caceres is almost a 50-50 fighter, not just in, like, your memory, my memory, and everybody else's, but actually by record. He's, like, going on a Randa Markos trend. And then all of a sudden, 4 big wins against guys that can grapple. That's the weirdest part. So the 4 wins, Stephen Ocho Peterson, Chase Hooper, Austin Springer, Kevin Kroom. Kevin Kroom looked like he had never run, 2 feet in his life by the end of that fight. Like, the cardio and the pace, Alex Caceres makes you fight his fight, and that's the scariest thing when you fight a guy like that. But for Seung Woo Choi, the guy comes into the UFC and he loses 2 in a row, and you go, okay, well, he loses to Movsar Evloev.
You may have heard
A, you must have thought Choi was pretty good if you're going to match him up with Evloev. And then B, he loses to Gavin Tucker in a fight where he had certain successes in that fight before he gets caught and submitted, a guy that we saw at Fight League Atlantic 2 this weekend.
I have to say this when I think about Seung Woo Choi. I always go back to, it was some post-fight video that they had after the Gavin Tucker Seung Woo Choi fight. And Gavin Tucker was training at TriStar at the time, so Firas Zahabi was in his corner. And I remember vividly, these words will never leave my head. Firas Zahabi's out back and he goes, that kid's going to be really good. Like, I know he's 0-2 in the UFC, but like, from what we saw, we really think he's going to have a high ceiling. And listen, I don't put that much stock into stuff like that, but it stayed in the back of my mind. And I just kind of thought like, oh, I wonder if Seung Woo Choi will ever develop. Now, to me, I didn't think it was there. I thought, okay, you lose to Movsar Evloev, that's one thing. But just the way he got out-grappled and the fight sort of wore on him in the Gavin Tucker fight, it was one of those performances that it's like, okay, you better look good in your next fight or you're gone. Seung Woo Choi's looked almost like a completely different fighter as of late.
He mopped the floor with Suman Mokhtarian. Now, again, it's Suman Mokhtarian, but
there's a name in there that matters, and it looks even better now.
I'm a wrestler. I'm a striker. I beat Suman everywhere. I beat Yusuf Zalal at everything, and then I fight Julian Erosa. Now, Julian's a 50-50 fighter. Sometimes he beats Charles Jourdain. Sometimes he loses to guys you've never heard of. But the point of this is, Seung Woo Choi looked amazing. We brought in the Sting. So can the Stinger sting this weekend like it did in my hand a couple of weeks ago and it blew up like a blown-up glove?
So the last thing I want to say about that Choi win over Julian Erosa is that at least that's a win that we can go back on and talk about in the future. You know what I mean? Like, that's not a performance that Seung Woo Choi just had and is sort of lost on everybody. If you go out there and knock out Julian Erosa, we're going to continue to talk about that for a long time because, yes, Julian Erosa's lost by stoppage. He might not be the greatest fighter ever. But to beat a guy like that by stoppage is just a really impressive feat for any prospect to do. It proves that you must have good power. You have to have at least a good level of cardio. I understand the fight was over pretty quick, but you know what I mean? Like, Julian Erosa is not an easy night in the office for anybody, and a win over him really does mean a lot to me. I know he has a lot of stoppage losses, and again, if you're going to beat him, you're going to beat him like Seung Woo Choi did, but that's one of those wins that I can always look to and think, wow, if you can beat a guy like Julian Erosa, you can there's a place for you in the UFC. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, the neat thing, too, I mean, Seung Woo Choi's been getting it done with his team, and he continues kind of on that same path that he was on before the Erosa fight, so on and so forth. The most interesting thing that I saw when I did a quick IG search was the fact that Alex Caceres just opened his own gym in Florida. So I threw that one in there. It's on the second graphic that pops up throughout. Not really with the MMA lab. I'm sure he's gotten rounds in with some of the guys there. Giant names in some of the lower weight classes too. But good for Alex Caceres, man. The guy's turned his career around. He's a very fun fighter, and he's going to be around for a long time. You don't go from a 4-fight losing streak to lose to a guy like Seung Woo Choi, and then you're gone. Same thing for Choi. You lose to Alex Caceres, it's definitely not over for you. Like, we're starting to get close to the rankings at 145. We're starting to have fun fights. You know, the winner of this could fight Gavin Tucker again. Like, we're starting to get up there. I don't know. A lot of fun fights. But, Matt, when I look at the odds for this one, Caceres open a plus 155 underdog. He's a plus 227 right now. So, a little bit of shade over there. Seung Woo Choi open a minus 180. He's roughly a minus 287. The Tapology votes, 824 total votes, 77% Choi, 64% by decision, 29% by knockout. For the 23% that have Caceres, 73% by decision. Caceres has been getting it done against guys that you kind of win one, you lose one. Like, it's tough to tell. Kevin Kroom sometimes can submit Roosevelt Roberts. He can lose to the Derek Minners. Like, he's one of those type of fighters. And if you look at it for the rest of the guys, you can make the same comparisons. Maybe I'm way overvaluing Seung Woo Choi, but I still, and I know I said this before his last fight, I think Seung Woo Choi still has a really high ceiling, and I really I like him quite a bit. Against a lot of guys in this division, I think he's got a great chance against Caceres.
And he's still a young guy, too. He is adding new things to his game, and he's proved that just throughout his UFC tenure. He's, 5 fights into it, and he looks like a much improved fighter than he did when he had his introduction against Evloev, 3 years ago? Like, it hasn't been that long, and he's made massive steps in his game, and I expect him to make even more improvements as he progresses. This is what I will say about Caceres. All day long, I've been trying to think of, a game plan for Caceres to win, because I kind of wanted to be a hipster. I was going to have an underdog pick in this one. But it is tough. If you look at the last 4 opponents Caceres has had, they do have big weaknesses. All those fighters have something that you can point to that Alex Caceres does quite a bit better than them. Other than just volume strike on the outside, and honestly, Seung Woo Choi is a pretty good striker on the outside, Alex Caceres doesn't have a really big X factor that he really pulls away from Seung Woo Choi in this fight. On some of the grappling exchanges, I actually think could be kind of fun in this, because Caceres can get held down, but he can force scrambles sometimes. I think that could be really fun, but Seung Woo Choi, I think, is the much more physically dominant fighter, so I think in the clinch he's going to have success. I think he's a much more powerful fighter, so if he gets on the inside of Caceres' range, he'll have success. I just like the overall game of Choi in this matchup.
The scariest thing is, this fight reminds me a lot of Ludwig Klein last weekend against Nate Landwehr, where you go, okay, I think I know where this prospect is at. Oh, apparently I don't, and the guy's got no cardio. So I'm going with Choi, but again, I have reservations just off of that one from last week, kind of reverberating here, but I do like Choi in terms of the stand-up, the wrestling, the scrambling. Caceres, though, he's one of those guys like Andre Arlovsky did last weekend, where we can just kind of pitter-patter, throw the volume, not take a lot of damage, and end up winning another decision fight.
There's a thing to be said about a guy who's just been around for a long time. It's not like Alex Caceres has been cut from the UFC 4 times he got brought back. Like, he's been,
not Julian Erosa.
No, he's been in this organization the whole time. And yeah, the record might not be great. And he's not really in the Matt Brown category of, you've just been fighting the best, so of course your record's going to be bad. But, Alex Caceres has been around for a while. And I'm sure
decision loss to Yair Rodrigues.
Exactly. Alex Caceres is going to be capable to pull off a win in this fight. I just think the overall, Choi is an impressive prospect, I think. And I really do think that if he does continue to make improvements like he has in the past, he really could find himself in the rankings at some point.
Both of us going with South Korea's Seung Woo Choi to get the win. We also have South Korea's Junyoung Park on this card. He's got a very interesting fight against Gregory Rodrigues. If you missed that, check it out. And hey, big time main event coming up. You have Marvin Vettori taking on Paulo Costa. You're not going to want to miss it, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.